Bueno, pues a continuación va a estar con nosotros Johnny Longden. Johnny Longden lleva más de 16 años impulsando el crecimiento comercial a través de estrategias de productos basadas en datos y en la experimentación digital. Como director de crecimiento en CRO, está a la vanguardia del movimiento de crecimiento basado en la experimentación. Johnny tiene una trayectoria diversa, habiendo liderado equipos de experimentación, producto y crecimiento en grandes empresas como Boohoo, Sky y Visa, además de haber brindado consultoría estratégica a marcas globales. Le apasiona ayudar a las empresas a aprovechar el poder de la experimentación para alcanzar su máximo potencial. Un fuerte aplauso para Johnny Longden.
I'm going to be talking to you today about making decisions and how to make better decisions. And that will become clear as I talk. Ricardo already introduced me very well. Thank you, Ricardo. I've been in experimentation since it was invented. So I first ran an A/B test in around 2007. And I've built agency teams. I've built in-house teams at places like Sky. And I'm currently Chief Growth Officer for CRO, a global experimentation agency and consultancy. So that's me. Follow me on LinkedIn if you don't already. I do a lot of content on LinkedIn. So here's the starting point. I know a lot of people here will know A/B testing. A/B testing is simply not as good as you think it is. And that's the starting point. What do I mean by that? Well, there are a lot of technical issues with A/B testing, especially if you use cookies. So some people are fortunate enough to test on logged-in areas of an app or a product, but the majority of us are testing on websites that use cookies. And if you are compliant with European e-privacy regulations, you will have to only track people who have accepted your cookies. That can be as low sometimes as 20, 30, 40%. The average is regarded to be around 40%. That means your test is on a subset of the data, but the people who actually accept cookies are very different to people who don't. So it's a very skewed piece of data. Even without the problem of cookies, you have cross-device visits. So one person using different devices. You have different people using the same devices. You have ad blockers. You have devices that delete cookies. There are lots of issues. So the technicality around the data of A/B testing is not very good. Okay, so the second problem, generalizability. When you run a test, you are gathering a piece of data within a 2-week period, sometimes, and you're assuming that the rest of time will be the same. But it won't be the same. You have different campaigns, you have different types of traffic coming to the site. So A/B testing is effectively trying to make a prediction that this period of time will be the same as all time, and it isn't. And a study recently found that only half of A/B tests conducted will repeat when conducted again 6 months later. There's an even bigger problem. All A/B tests are done using metrics like conversion rate. And it seems nice and simple that you want to increase your conversion rate, but that's not always telling the right story. So a good example is retail. My role previous to the one I have now was in fashion retail for a big fashion retailer called Boohoo. In fashion retail, you can increase your conversion rate, you can increase your revenue, you can increase your profit by reducing your prices and applying discounts. And all your financial numbers might go up, but you will probably be ruining the business by giving customers a bad perception of the product, and creating unhealthy competition with other businesses. So these things cannot be measured as metrics, but they are very important. And so metrics only tell one part of the story. Statistics, let's face it, who really understands statistics? Even some of the world's leading experts don't really agree on it. And you getting things wrong has a really detrimental effect. So, I also have to go backwards here. So, now this is only a problem if you think an A/B test is a decision. And this is the point of the presentation. So, most people run tests and it either wins or it loses. And if it wins, you definitely do that thing. And if it loses, don't do that thing. So we're trying to use A/B tests as this automatic decision that tells you exactly what to do. And that's the problem. An A/B test is not good enough to tell you exactly that you should do that thing. But it doesn't mean that it isn't valuable. So this is the way to look at it. At the moment, we try and do the top. We run some strategy, we run some research, come up with ideas, create experiments, and then definitely do that thing. And the better way to look at it is that you have a strategy, you come up with some ideas, and all of that is supported by research which includes experimentation, includes A/B testing. An A/B test is a piece of research. It's a piece of information that helps you decide. But very importantly, you are making the decision. Even if you are at the moment running A/B tests and then doing things off the back of them, you're making the decision. You just don't realize that you're making the decision. So the key question becomes, how do you make effective decisions? How do human beings make effective decisions? And this is the key point. Experimentation is not A/B testing. We tend to think, I do experimentation, meaning I'm doing A/B testing. But experimentation is a bigger thing than A/B testing. It might include A/B tests, but experimentation is bigger. And what is the most successful experiment that was ever done? Well, arguably the Apollo missions, the moon landings. So the Apollo moon landing was an experimental endeavor. It was an audacious goal and perhaps the greatest achievement that humans have ever done in the history of humanity. And the thing that made it experimental was not an experiment. There may have been somebody testing rocket propulsion. There may have been somebody testing spacesuits. But those experiments are not the thing that created the success. What created the success was the whole program, the organized learning, and the management that allowed all of those things to be brought together. So true experimentation is a management and operating system. It's how you gather data and learning and how you make decisions off all of that data and learning, regardless of what it is. And it's about coordinating different people doing different things to help you achieve goals. So, with that in mind, we're going to look at the Apollo missions. There are 4 key aspects of the Apollo missions that we can learn from in terms of how we build experimentation operating systems and ultimately better decisions. So the first one is what I call moonshot management, which is how you take vision and objectives and create coordinated experiments. So President Kennedy gave the Apollo missions their objective. He said, "I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth." So it's a SMART goal. It's specific, measurable, all that. And this is the pattern of how these kind of theories work. So in any kind of scientific field, you have theory and observation. And experimentation allows you to translate observation into theory and back. So an example is if I drop this on the floor, it will fall straight down. That is the observation of the law of gravity. But I can have a theory about why that happens, and I can run experiments to develop my theory. So in the business world, it's exactly the same. We have theories about how we can grow our business, about how we can innovate and be great. And we can observe customer and market behavior in order to then further those theories. This is a specific example. So this is a real example. I used to work with a department store in London called Liberty. It's a beautiful department store, a little bit like Harrods. And they wanted to appeal to a younger audience. So there's a big strategic problem that they had. So we decided to approach it experimentally like this. I'm not going to go through this in every detail, but for every big problem, you can break it down into different hypotheses. So if you want to appeal to a younger audience, there's only two things that's really going to do, broad two things. One, you need to change the nature of the product that you're selling. Number two, you need to target different people. You need to target audiences differently in media and marketing. And you can break those down further. So using a particular example, maybe by changing the product, all we need to do is merchandise differently. So have different products in email, on landing pages. Or maybe we need to actually have different products. We need to change product lines. And that then gives rise to a series of experiments. And those experiments are not necessarily A/B tests. They're not necessarily on a website. They could be anywhere. But the point is that you are learning and feeding back into the theory. So we start with broad theories, we ask questions, we run experiments, and we have feedback loops that allow us to learn. And eventually, we learn, okay, we've tried various things in the realm of merchandising and media. That doesn't work. We've tried things in targeting and marketing. That did work. So now we know how to go to the next step with that. So this is a really important part of the proper function of experimentation that often gets forgotten. A lot of people, what they do is simply just come up with a lot of ideas. So you can look at a website and go, maybe we move that, maybe we change that. And that's typically how CRO and experimentation gets done. This is how to be more strategic and how to drive the business with it. Number two, mission control. So there were 400,000 people involved in the Apollo missions in multiple different countries, different agencies, different businesses, all over the world. And the genius of the Apollo mission was the coordination and the management that allowed all of that to be brought together into a single mission. So in today's business world, if you ask a CEO if they're doing experimentation, they would say, yeah, we've got somebody over there who has an A/B testing tool. So tick, we do experimentation. But that is not managing an overall business in an experimental way. So the system that you use, the operating system, is really key. And what do I mean by an operating system? Well, in one level, it is a piece of software, or multiple pieces of software. But how do you manage the goals and how those goals map into different objectives? How do you manage the workflow of different ideas? and different tests that you might be running, and the learning and the data. That all needs to come together into one kind of system. And very importantly, the decision framework. How are decisions made? If you gather multiple pieces of evidence about something, how do you synthesize that into something that enables you to make a decision? And how do these systems have feedback loops with product systems, marketing systems? So this kind of system, not many people have. You might have an A/B testing tool. You might have a spreadsheet of ideas, and your engineering team might have Jira. But there are very few unified systems that bring all of this together and allow this process to work. Number 3, simulations and test flights. So the Apollo missions didn't just conjure up one huge rocket and blast it into space. There was a very careful process of iterative development and learning. And they would start with small tests. So let's test something small about rocket propulsion, and we'll test something small about spacesuits, gravity, and then we'll bring that back together. And eventually, individual tests became test missions. So they would have a test flight with no people in it, and then another test flight. And the process was iteratively creating bigger things, but bringing learning together into test flights that got bigger. But most A/B testing and most experimentation in the business world tends to just be a way of sense checking something. So product teams often build features, and they will build the whole feature. They will spend 3 or 4 weeks building a feature and then test it before it's pushed live. But the big question is, should you have built the thing in the first place? Should you have invested the time in spending 3 weeks building the feature? Experimentation is best served to answer that question. So strategic innovation is a gradual series of innovation and iteration. And that works in a bit way like a horse race. So for every single idea that you have, you could come up with 100 ideas. But the best way to process that is for every single idea, what is the smallest possible thing, the least effort thing that you can do in order to determine whether or not it's a good idea. So for some ideas, you might just run a little piece of data analysis or a small business case. You might be able to ask internal employees about it. There's very small things that you can do. And only some ideas will make it through to the next step. So for a lot of ideas, you will then decide, actually, this doesn't seem like a good idea anymore. Let's park that. But some things make it through to the next step. And you maybe do some kind of proof of concept. That might be prototyping with customers. It might be an internal prototype. Again, it's low effort. And eventually, if those things prove viable, you might move to what you call a test flight, which is a more live experiment with customers, an A/B test, anything like that. And then ultimately, those things prove viable, and you go to more iterative development, which is the product MVP stuff that we all know about. And then if that works, then you're in full feature development. And the most important thing here is that you are increasing the effort and the cost as you increase the confidence. You start small, you don't know if it's a good idea, and as you build confidence, you build the effort and the investment. So you only really invest in the things that you're confident in. And I said right at the beginning, Experimentation does not need to mean A/B testing. We as a business world have got ourselves stuck in the idea that an A/B test is the only kind of experiment. And if you can't do that, there's no point doing anything else. This is not true. There are all sorts of things you can do. I won't read all of these out, but a good way to think of it is, what's the kind of validation that you're trying to run? So, types of validation, uncovering a problem and working out whether that problem exists. So trying to validate or find problems that customers are having. Concept and value proposition. So you might have an idea about a product that will serve a particular purpose. Will it really? Are you imagining it? How do you develop actual solutions? So you might have a prototype solution. Does it do what you think it's going to do, etc.? So there are different types of validation along different points of the innovation process. And there are different ways of running validation. And a good way to think of it is low fidelity, mid fidelity, and high fidelity, again corresponding to that idea that you can increase spend as you learn. And the fourth and possibly the most important part here is moving from metrics to decision logic and systems engineering. And the point of this presentation was about decisions and making better decisions. Now, this is very complicated. You won't be able to read it. Don't worry. It's shown as an example. So, this is a causal loop diagram of the problem of space debris. And it's really just an example of systems thinking and systems logic. So what this does, and these diagrams are quite common, but this is trying to understand the different ways that things interact with each other and that things impact with each other. And I mentioned before the problem in retail of being able to increase conversion, but at the same time negatively impacting customer perception of brand or customer experience. And this is the same principle. You know, it seems very simple to measure conversion rate and to say, yeah, we need to increase conversion rate. But conversion rate is just one little thing in a big system that represents customer experience. Conversion is a strange thing that a lot of people don't understand. The brain wants to simplify the idea that traffic comes to the website, that's media, and the website converts people. So that's the conversion rate. And so it's very common in businesses for people to say, our conversion rate is down. What's wrong with the website? But the conversion rate is just a piece of maths. It's just traffic divided by orders. So anything at all that can impact any of those, either of those numbers, which would be your competitors, brand, price of the product, the weather, anything at all can impact the conversion rate. And that's because there is this complex system of things at play that govern whether or not someone is going to buy from you. And conversion rate is an enormous simplification of all of that, which doesn't really work. It's just one little piece of maths. But in reality, there are all sorts of things happening. There is campaigns that competitors are doing, pricing, weather, the economic environment, and all of these things will have these interactions with each other to cause your business to make money or to not make money. And it's very difficult to understand, but you can begin to understand it. And this is the root of how you start to make better decisions, because you can understand pieces of information that help you bring this together. And how you do that is to start to build decision-making frameworks. So this is a famous decision framework called the OODA loop, O-O-D-A. And it was created by the US military. And I'm not going to go through it in specific detail, but it's a framework for how to make decisions in stressful situations. It's designed for military situations where they have to quickly assess inputs. What can we observe? What are the circumstances? What do we already know? How do we orient ourselves within this information? What are the kinds of biases and assumptions that we've brought that we need to be careful of? You know, maybe we're relying on things we think have happened in the past that we shouldn't. So how do we synthesize all of that together and apply that to a hypothesis in order to then take action? Now, this particular model is not necessarily the model that you should use. It's specifically to make a point. If you think back to that idea of running an A/B test and getting yes, no, definitely do this, don't do it. And then what I've talked about in terms of all of the kind of complex systems that go into that. If you run an A/B test with imperfect cookie data that might be giving you a wrong answer, and you just do that thing, you've made a very, very poor decision. Alternatively, you can run the A/B test and say, that's one piece of information. What else do we know? We know that our competitors are regressive at the moment. We know that it's really good weather and people are probably going away for the weekend. You know, there are all sorts of bits of information. How do you synthesize that into a decision? How do you understand that, you know, actually this piece of content might not be good for our brand. It's not really on brand. And that's probably more important than the outcome of the experiment. So this kind of logic is the thing that is missing, where you really need to have operating systems that allow you to synthesize different pieces of information into how you decide what to push live, what to actually do. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm a little bit early. A little bit more time for...
Bueno, muchas gracias, Johnny.
Extra time.
Vamos a... Let's see what questions have the public for you. Si queréis hacerle alguna pregunta a Johnny, podéis utilizar Slido. Ok. Muchas gracias por hacer las preguntas directamente en inglés. Es todo un detalle. Let's see the first 2 or 3 questions for Johnny. If any one of you want to talk with him later, he will be in the breakfast. So now we are going to breakfast after this presentation. The first one is, have you ever disregarded test results that were technically valid but contextually misleading? What guided that decision?
Yeah, and that's a really good summary of this presentation because that's what you should do. So an A/B test, even if it is statistically perfectly valid, is not necessarily telling you the whole story. There are other things to consider. Even if the test has good data and good statistics, that idea of generalizability, you will not see that in the data. And the idea also that metric is only one way of looking at things. You will not see that in the data. So, yeah, I mean, a great example is, again, from fashion retail. The fashion world is very much about brand and about brand perception. So, you can very easily sell a lot of clothes by reducing the price, but the perception of the brand based on the price is key. So we would run tests with very low discounts, so Black Friday style discounts, but we would have to say, if we start introducing these discounts, we may never be able to come back from it. When somebody has paid and had an 80% discount on a dress, are they ever really going to pay full price again? So you have to consider these things, and these decisions cannot really be made using data. It comes down to brand and what the strategy is. And again, so all these kind of strategic things need to be taken into consideration.
The top voted right now is, what do you think about AI making real-time decisions in experimentation?
Yeah, AI is an absolutely fascinating part of this discussion. I didn't really go into it for interests of time. But AI has some enormous benefit in helping you make these decisions. Because if you think about that systems theory and all of the different things that come into play, AI has this enormous potential to help you bring all of that information together. And AI can create causal loop diagrams, or at least give you the data to create causal loop diagrams to help you understand the different interplay of things. So there is some really good potential there. But AI making real-time decisions is very dangerous for exactly the same reason. Ultimately, that's a more advanced version of just us assuming that a win is definitely something that we should do. Out of interest, our analytics team created a fascinating AI agent. You would find information on my LinkedIn if you go down far enough. But we created a set of AI agents to analyze the results of A/B tests. And we have 3 separate LLMs. So one is specifically told to act as a kind of an enthusiastic CRO. And it analyzes the test results looking for anything that will make it seem positive. So it looks at the segmentation and it will argue for the test being a winner. And then we have another LLM that is agentically looking at the test and arguing against. So it's being cynical about the statistics, arguing that it's potentially a false positive. And then we have a judge in the middle who takes into account other things like brand and makes a rational decision. So it considers the 2 arguments as a judge and offers rational logic around how to interpret those results. So that's a really clever way of using AI. But that's the better way to do it than to think that AI can autonomously make a decision and do things for you. I still think today that that's quite dangerous.
Okay, and the last one is, as you say at the start, the A/B testing depends on the moment you do it. Do you think we should repeat the same A/B test after a weeks, months to contrast?
Yeah, I mean, just to repeat the study, I can't exactly remember who it was that did it, but it was a client-side company, and they repeated all their tests 6 months later and found that only half of them actually replicated. So what do you do about that? Well, some people have holdout cells. Again, you really need to be in a place where you are testing on logged in users and you're randomizing user IDs to do that. So you have a holdout cell that gets no tests, and then you can see the impact of all the tests. That's one way to do it. But personally, I think it's all a little bit over the top. I think, exactly as I've pointed out, an A/B test is just a piece of information. It's just like a piece of research. If you run a user test or a survey, It's the same. It's just different, and it's just using more data. So the problem only comes here when you're, to try and replicate these tests is if you're trying to have the A/B test be a really, really accurate guidance as what you should do. It isn't. It never will be. So it's just a piece of research and a piece of insight. You make the decision. You need to sit and decide, how do we interpret this? How do we add it to other things, other pieces of information that we've got? And exactly as I showed that OODA model, you need to be thinking, how do we make decisions? That's the thing that's missing. Everyone's focused on the A/B testing and not on the human side of it, of like how they're sitting inside a business making a decision. One analogy that I've always used is the world of A/B testing is a bit like if you were building a house and you became obsessed with hammering and you were like, what's the best hammer I can buy and what's the best technique? But you forgot that you were supposed to be building a house. And, experimentation to me is getting back to building the house. And a lot of that is, what are you doing? How are you making decisions as a whole?
Okay. Thank you so much, Johnny Longden.
Thank you very much.